Explore the unofficial world of DPRK-inspired apparel at NK News Shop. Dive into a captivating collection of North Korea-themed t-shirts, hoodies, and more at the NK News Shop. From the popular Daedonggang beer t-shirts to the adventurous Air Koryo designs, each piece offers a unique glimpse into aspects of the DPRK you'll be familiar with. Featuring retro travel-inspired prints of Pyongyang's landmarks and brands, our apparel is 100% handcrafted in the USA. Support independent journalism with every purchase. Explore our range today at shop.nknews.org. That's shop.nknews.org. Hello listeners and welcome to the NK News podcast. This episode was recorded on Tuesday the 17th of June 2025 via StreamYard while I'm on vacation in the Netherlands and Chad is back at the NK News office. Hi Chad, how's it going there?
I'm good, thanks. Yes, nice to see you in your homeland.
No crisis on the peninsula yet?
Not like Iran, no.
Right, well exactly. Now you've been thinking about Iran and the parallels with North Korea and its nuclear weapons program. So let's talk a bit about that.
Well, yeah, so for those who have not been following the news, Israel has struck multiple locations relating to Iran's nuclear program, targeted attacks against some of the key military leadership figures, scientists involved with the nuclear program. And just this morning, President Trump said on Truth Social that everyone should evacuate Tehran.
Oh.
And so I've been wondering about how North Korea has been looking at this. And I think there are a few things that come to mind. Firstly, Kim Jong-un, I think now is probably very well assured that he's made the right choice with developing a nuclear weapons program, because I cannot imagine Israel have taken a risk like this with a country such as North Korea, where the nuclear program is so far advanced and there are multiple delivery systems that could create serious nuclear costs for the adversary in a case of an attack like this. But there have also been some things that have happened from this that I think are also worth noting. Kim Jong-un has talked a lot about DPRK missile capabilities, investing in more launchers, but we've just seen the Israeli Air Force and Defense Forces wipe out, according to their words, 1/3 of Iran's launching capability in just a few days. And although Tel Aviv has been hit with barrage after barrage of Iranian missiles, it's not, from what we've seen so far, it's not been an existential threat at all for Israel. And the missiles have come in relatively limited waves. And I think Kim Jong-un will be looking at that and scratching his head as to just how effective is the DPRK missile capability against a modern adversary such as South Korea with some similar capabilities to Israel.
Like the THAAD anti-missile batteries, for example.
Yeah, and F-35 fighter jets. Lastly, I think the other thing is that a key difference between Iran and DPRK is, of course, Iran is much more open, which has allowed Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, to completely infect it with agents, with people capable of building drone launching facilities inside Iran, and obviously extremely good knowledge about where these top generals have been, like the exact locations, the exact time, such that there could be very precise strikes to assassinate them, basically. And I think Kim Jong-un learns from that just the vital importance of doubling down on this strict information cordon that has been a key characteristic of the North for decades now.
Yeah, watching the information come out about Israel's operation in Iran, it's been fascinating to see just the level of infiltration by Israeli military and other intelligence agencies into Iran. Now, Iran, of course, it's a different language, it's a different cultural group for Israel. So if you're an agent operating inside Iran, you have to speak Farsi or perhaps one of the other local languages there. And we think about, how many decades has it been since there's been a real successful intelligence scoop brought out of North Korea by South Korean agents infiltrated in North Korea. Now, of course, there's also always a possibility that they may be happening we're just not hearing about them. The NIS or the South Korean military isn't telling us. But we do know that North Korea sort of prides itself on, and even teaches children in comic books, as I like to talk about, that hunting spies, hunting down agents of South Korea, of the United States. And so they seem to have been quite successful at making sure that anybody walking around who doesn't look like they belong gets picked up immediately and interrogated. Whereas in Iran, it just looks like the Israelis have been able to act with impunity, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the other thing I think that's different with Iran is, of course, there is a pretty sizable opposition.
Mm,
There are a lot of people that despise the religious leadership, and those are the kind of natural bedfellows for Israeli intelligence operatives to combine forces with. Whereas in North Korea, of course, the huge risk of being involved in some kind of foreign intelligence gathering system or
yeah,
structure is just, the risk reward
mm,
calculus is really just not in line with facilitating that kind of cooperation. So there are big
yeah,
differences, but I do think one of the interesting lessons from all of this is just that, maybe without nuclear warheads on those missiles, which would be a big step for North Korea to do in the event of any kind of confrontation, just how effective would its missiles be in causing, with kinetic warheads, like huge
mm,
amounts of damage when Iran has been, it's not, for years everyone thought of Iran as this like regional superpower
yeah.
which had very sophisticated military capabilities, nascent nuclear program, and I mean, it's still early to say, but it wouldn't surprise me if its military is kind of begging for a ceasefire in the days ahead.
Going back to sort of where we started from, if we wind the clock back 31 years to 1994, when North Korea did not yet have an existing nuclear weapon, but was on the way to one, perhaps similar to where Iran was a week or so ago. I remember that was when President Bill Clinton of the United States was very, very close to considering preemptive strikes to take out that nuclear program, but ultimately did not. Looking at the situation now with Israel and Iran, well, just remind our listeners why it was that they decided not, in the end, not to go ahead with those preemptive strikes in '94.
Well, because there still is a huge North Korean artillery force close to the border, close to Seoul, that, there are so many different estimates out there of the damage that that artillery force could do to certainly a large part of northern Seoul in the event of some kind of confrontation very quickly. And there would have been, a pretty significant loss of life.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't happen. South Korea, obviously, at the time was, in a very economically advantageous position coming
Mm.
out of dictatorship, early 90s. And also, frankly speaking, South Korea is quite risk averse from my observation of how it conducts foreign policy and national security, except maybe under President Yoon, former President Yoon. So I think it was just that the people just preferred to kick the can down the road. And we were talking about this the other day. I wonder if, in hindsight, people thought that was a wise idea, because the result now is an extremely capable North Korea. The policy options to respond to it in the event of military crisis are very limited right now.
Well, and also given that, I mean, does it to come back to your first assertion that Kim Jong Un must be thinking, well, it's right to have a nuclear program because look, Israel was able to attack Iran precisely because it had no nuclear program. But if you compare it to 30 years ago, North Korea didn't yet have a nuclear weapon and it wasn't attacked. So maybe the artillery would have been enough to have kept North Korea safe all these years, and they could have used that money that was spent on the nuclear and missiles programs on other things like feeding and housing the people and setting up a functioning industry and electrical infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that argument before. Clearly, the North Koreans didn't believe the artillery was enough. And I mean, since 1994, obviously, we've had the US invasion of Iraq, the toppling of Saddam Hussein, Libya. I think there was a lot of lessons learned
Mm,
by the North Koreans from all of these consecutive
yeah,
overthrows of authoritarian leaders. And I always like to say they've kind of built the sort of ultimate authoritarian system, if you will, that seems to have taken a lot of lessons from
mm,
where others failed and built upon them and built mitigation strategies over and over again.
yeah, yeah. It
Um,
does seem that way. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. Let's talk about inter-Korean propaganda. So I understand that under new President Lee Jae-myung, South Korea shut off its speakers, and then a day later, North Korea did the same.
That's correct, yeah, and it kind of says something of North Korea's interest in having those speakers on, where, some people that came to Korea thought it was just North Korea trying to provoke or
Mm.
antagonize the South, but we if we look at the timeline, it did all come after the South Koreans decided to allow leafleting again, which resulted in the North Korean balloons, which resulted in South Korea turning the loudspeakers on. It was like a very tit for tat mechanism. So yeah,
And that all seems to have stopped now, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah, which is probably good for all of the residents in those two, the north and southern part of the border there, because it was very loud.
And the South Korean government is once more cracking down on civic groups that are sending their own leaflets into North Korea, threatening punishment. It's a bit like a redo of the Moon administration, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit of whiplash, to be honest, going back and forth and back again within
Yeah.
such a short time, less than 3 years. So yeah, I wonder how, if you're in communications for the South Korean Foreign Ministry or Ministry of Unification explaining this stuff, and you're like
Yes.
flipping the script in May 2022, and then you're flipping the script again back to pre-May 2022 and the UN was elected. It's like, it's just hard to, I think, sensibly communicate such vastly different positions in a coherent way. But
Well,
that's
here's
what they're.
a provocative question for you. Do you think that, given that North Korea switched off its speakers so quickly after South Korea turned its off, do you think that there was any back-channel communication perhaps going on between North and South Korea, particularly now that we have, as the head of the NIS in South Korea, this former unification minister who's, previously been an engager with North Korea? What do you think?
I think for now, no. I think it was just them reciprocating in an unofficial way. There was no need for them to have those speakers on, but I have a doubt that there is any comms line active as of yet.
Okay. Huh. Now, Lee Jae-myung did say in his run-up to the election that he would try to reinstitute the comprehensive military agreement between the two Koreas, didn't he?
Yes, he did. I mean, theoretically, that could be possible. It would require, I guess, it would require contact to restart, which is where I see the bottleneck. Like North Korea,
Right.
as we know, maybe potential interest from the White House in talking. There's the Russia stuff, dealing with a kind of difficult relationship with China, whether there's the bandwidth for South Korea stuff as well, given they've dismantled all of those apparatus and institutions that were
Mm.
intended for decades to deal with South Korea. I'm not sure.
I saw on NK News yesterday that there are some South Korean, sailors or fishermen who ended up accidentally North Korean sailors or fishermen who ended up in South Korean waters who have requested to go back, and South Korea is intent on helping them go back. Could this be something to open up that bottleneck?
Yes, it could be, but I think probably the way the North Koreans would respond to any communications on that would be very bounded by just the issue at hand for the present time. I don't
Right.
know. Maybe I'm just jaded, but I feel like we're not going to see any serious inter-Korean détente for a while.
Okay. In the last minute, anything you'd like to flag or predict coming up in the next week or so?
Well, something that's kind of interesting is that there's been some movement on potential tourism reopening to North Korea. One of the agencies, Young Pioneer Tours, yesterday said that there's some new hopes for Rason Tours to
Mm.
restart. That was a bit of a surprise to myself after they sort of shied away from that earlier this year. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. And then all eyes on October for the 80th anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party of Korea. I'm sure there's going to be some interesting developments lined up for that.
Definitely. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Chad O'Connell, for coming on the NK News podcast today via StreamYard. And we'll see you again when I'm back in Korea.
Take care, Jacko.
Thank you.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our podcast episode for today. Our thanks go to Brian Betts and Alana Hill for facilitating this episode, and to our post-recording producer genius Gabby Magnuson, who cuts out all the extraneous noises, awkward silences, bodily functions, and fixes the audio levels. Thank you, and listen again next time.